Okay, my clock shows 10 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started with the training. This is training for Sierra cataloging for Suburban libraries. My name is Steve Heiser. I'm the Library Systems Admin from MCFLS, and we'll walk through some of the steps you'll use today when cataloging materials for your libraries. Since the process of ordering and selection ordering and paying for these materials are so closely intertwined, I kind of also involve some of the acquisitions or ordering process as part of this discussion. If I'm leaving anything out, of course, you can always ask me questions later on in the presentation. The way it's going to work today is that we're going to mute everyone here on the call. Initially, we'll run through the presentation, which is on average taking about 45 minutes or so. And at the end of the presentation, we can submit questions via the chat interface at the bottom. Okay, Scott, I got a message from Scott saying I'm cutting in and out. Is that the same experience from everyone? If you can respond in the chat interface, just let me know. Okay, Amy says it's working fine. Scott, is this still continues to be a problem for you? Okay, it seems to be okay. You guys, I'm not sure what's going on. It might be just your connection to me. That might be the issue. Okay, looks like we're on track now. Sorry about that. The wonderful world of online training. So anyway, we'll have questions via the chat interface at the end of the session. We are using a training server today. Our current server we're using for preview mode, which is going to be our Sierra server come April 2nd, does not allow us to look at or actually make changes to records. It's very limited in terms of making actual changes to the database. In fact, it doesn't do any of that. So we're using a training server so that we can see everything that we need to. I am recording the session today. It will be available on mcflis.org underneath Continuing Education. There's a bunch of links there up already from sessions we've done previously. Also, it will be available under the MCFLS YouTube channel. That's available publicly, so if you go to YouTube, do a search for MCFLS 1, MCFLS numeral 1, you'll see a list of the videos there for all those that we'll do. And there'll be quite a few. I think we're going to be doing about 10 or 11 sessions. I see a lot of repeat customers on the line here, so bear with me. A lot of this will be the same, but we will talk some in depth about the cataloging for suburban libraries and, of course, answer any questions. The primary goal for this training is to give you what you need to know to be able to work with Sierra on April 2nd and moving forward, so you can hit the ground running and do what you need to do that day and the weeks following. The secondary goal is to give you assurance that most of the functions work in exactly the same way as they do in Millennium, and that goes true very much for cataloging for all of your staff. The timetable, just to give you an update, the staff preview mode started this week. Most or not all of you should have gotten an email regarding staff preview and some of the things we'd like you to check before we go live on April 2nd. We have actually a full month from today until we go live, so it's about 4 weeks there. The first thing we'd like you to do is log in and check that you can actually log in. That's the first step. If you're having issues with that, of course, you can talk to Kate at the help desk. She can take care of that for you very easily. And also the function menu that's in the upper right-hand corner of the screen to make sure everything is there. You're not going to be able to do everything you normally would do in Millennium in this preview mode. It's more or less a way to look at the data and get comfortable with the interface. So if you are prevented from doing certain operations like editing records, doing notices, It's not that you don't have the authorizations to do that. It's just that they've locked down everything. I don't have access to that myself, so that's why we're using the training server. Two of the other things we'd like you to check are your printers. Make sure your printers are available. Under File, select Printers to make sure that the printers you're going to be using in Millennium are the same ones you'll be using in Sierra. And also underneath Admin Settings to look at your macros and other settings to make sure that they match up. We'll talk about macros here a little bit in a second. April 2nd is still our go live date. For this group, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going to happen on the evening of April 1st. This is more of an acquisitions, information for acquisitions more than it is for cataloging per se, but since most of you are very much tied up with that whole process, I wanted to give you a reminder that this is almost going to be like the migration that took place on January 20th in terms of how it's going to affect people. We need to stop all the financial functions. This is on the evening of April 1st. Stop all financial functions, including input and editing of order records. Print, send all purchase orders and claims. We'll need to post all invoices and encumbrances, clearing all pay files in the encumbrances file. And lastly, I think this is the one that's most important, is to print the fund activity reports and clear the payment history file. There are some other areas here, but I'm not going to go through them. No one uses like the recommend file, for example. It's mostly the fund activity reports that we have to be worried about. This affects everybody using acquisitions for keeping track of ordering. Even if you're not doing full acquisitions, you're not keeping track of your money through Millennium, we still need to clear those payment history files, because if you're using order records of any type, it's still going to accumulate on the system. Now, the system will be down the entire day on April 2nd. Just plan for that. Similar to what we had experienced on January 20th. We were up pretty quickly on January 20th, luckily. And if things go well, I'm hopeful that we'll be down per approximately 4 to 6 hours, but just count that whole day out just to be on the safe side in case things get a little bit more complicated. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the basics of Sierra and some of the changes between Sierra and Millennium, and then we'll talk more specifically about the cataloging functions that you're going to need to know. So the login process is much different for the Suburban libraries than it is in Millennium. For the Suburban staff, you'll now have one login only into Sierra. What they've done is basically merge the settings for location served that had to be input first with your MC40 or your MCAT logins and merge those with your initials. So everything is part of your initials now. It knows what location you're at, what library you're part of, and everything is part of your initials. So that's the only thing you'll need to do to log in is use your initials. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And while this is logging in, we'll talk a little bit more about Sierra, some of the differences. I did want to, I say this every session, but I did want to assure you that all the modules and functions in Millennium have counterparts in Sierra. There are a few differences, but for the most part, particularly for cataloging, you'll see that this will be very easy for you to navigate once we start off with Sierra. Okay, so this should be logging in here. Okay, so this is the cataloging screen. Actually, we're right at the top of my list of functions. Just going to move my GoToMeeting module around here. As you can see, our initial function here is set for the catalog, which is what most yeah, this is what I'm set up to do. But for the Suburban libraries, I believe we've given just about everything um, to to have you do what you need to do for April 2nd. One of the things I did want to show right away, as soon as you log in, there, instead of using the SSH client to change your password, kind of like at SSH, you would now do that underneath the admin area here in Sierra. So in order to change your password, this would be for your initials. You just type in your old password and retype in the new one, and then hit OK, and that will save your new password. The biggest change with Sierra versus Millennium is that it does use a unified client. So instead of having modules for circulation, cataloging, serials, and acquisitions, you now have one client that you would use, and then use this function drop down here in the upper right to navigate between all of your different workflows. I have everything set up here for this training login. So no more modules, and it actually saves us on user licenses as well. Just, it's kind of an aside, but it does help us out with that part of it. The layout of the screens, there's the same command menu that you see in Millennium is the same that you'll see here in Sierra. There's a file, menu, edit, view, go. A lot of this is the same as what you would see in Millennium. It is function sensitive, so if I'm in catalog, I will see some differences with regard to what's available here in tools. But for the most part, all of these other areas here are going to remain the same. You're not going to be see too much of a difference. There are some language changes. Everything here in this drop-down at the upper right-hand corner, these areas here in the headings with the large capital print are referred to now as workflows rather than modules. So we have administration, serial, circulation, all of these are now referred to as workflows. And everything below them, these would correspond to what you would think of as buttons in Millennium. These are now referred to as just functions. There's no functions or modes. They're basically the same thing, so things should match up to what you would see in Millennium. And again, if you're not seeing things here in this drop down that you need to see to be able to do your job, by all means, let me know, or actually let Kate know at the help desk, and she can add those for you. The one thing that is a little bit different here in Sierra is the macros for the Go menu. If we bring up Millennium here, this is Millennium cataloging. The Go menu is specifically related to all of these functions within cataloging, whereas in Sierra, because everything is put together, you have a Go menu that has to include an extra step to get to your cataloging modes. So you have an extra step for cataloging in this case. So all of the function keys that you're using, F1, and all the modifiers for those have to be adjusted so that they can accommodate that extra step. As with Millennium, just because you see a function in this list in the upper right-hand corner does not mean necessarily that you have access to it. So your circades are not going to be able to use global update unless they're given that permission. Same thing with anything else that's on this list here. If you're not authorized to do it, you might see it on the list, but it will be grayed out or just not available to you when you try to access it. As you can see in this list here, we have a number of kind of customized workflows. When we go live, all of the Suburban libraries will have 4 main areas for workflows that we can modify. But we're going to give you a lot of things to start out with, but they should all include circulation, cataloging, acquisitions, and serials in terms of the workflows available to you. So at least everyone at your library is going to see that. And then after April 2nd is done and we're back to normal, we can start working with custom workflows for libraries if you want to do that. Okay, so before we get into the cataloging functions, I wanted to show you areas underneath the settings that I'd like you to take a look at before we go live, so that we're set up to be as efficient as possible with this. So if we go to Admin, Settings in Sierra, because we're merging settings from both logins and initials, this screen is a much larger one that you're probably used to in Millennium. If we look at settings here in Millennium, it isn't quite as much there. It's merging a lot of things together with the initials and logins. Underneath the first tab here for new records, I'd like you to verify what you see here underneath, particularly options for new records, to verify that what you're seeing in Millennium is what you're seeing in Sierra Preview. That's one of the things that we can actually change and modify before we go live to make sure that it matches up with what you're seeing. The other area that's kind of important is record templates. Click on that tab. This will be different for every library because of the type of templates that we have. But for example, if we look at item, normally every library has one specific type of item template set up specifically for your library. What I'd like you to do is make sure that this area in Millennium, if we go here and go to Admin Settings, go to Record Templates, you'll notice that I have this preferred template here set up for me. If I go to Item, I have the all-purpose item as my preferred template. What I'd like you to do is go through that list in Millennium for your what you're using for cataloging and make sure it matches up with what you're seeing in Preview. That's kind of an important step. And then lastly, if we go back to that new records, there is a section here at the bottom where it says records to attach to new bibliographic records. Make sure that that matches up also with what you're seeing in Millennium. There's one other section I wanted to kind of point out here underneath the Windows tab. Many of you like to use. It depends on how you like to work with the records, but many of you like to use this multi-window mode. You may also want to check to see how this matches up with what you're using in Millennium. So if we go here, go to Settings, and it's underneath this Windows tab. So in here I'm set up for multi-window mode, and I know many in cataloging like to use that to open up multiple records at once so they can do comparisons or however they want to work with the data. And then lastly, there is a tab in Sierra here for session statistics. We have the option here. This wasn't available for other modes, other modules. So for example, circulation, or I think circulation was the only one. But in cataloging, you were always able to see how many bibliographic records you updated or created. Something that some libraries like to keep track of after they close a session. You can check to see if this is actually something you want to have happen at your library. What happens is that after you close the session, it will give you a count of all this information, all these records that you've modified or created, and then you can print that off or make a record of it. It does involve one extra step before you can close out of the session, but it is available to everybody now, regardless of what you're doing in Sierra. Did also want to, for this group, I also did want to point out that there are some settings for record view properties in the command menu. If we go to View and then Record View Properties, you can see this is a little bit different for this training server, but this is what you would normally see in our Millennium server as well. So you can set up your record view properties to go to Summary for a particular record, or go straight to Edit or View. And this corresponds to what we're doing in Millennium. So if you go to View, Record View Properties in Millennium, it looks very similar. This is what it will look like in Sierra Preview once you look at it. Not sure if this is any different. Yeah, I think it's just, for us, it's going to be bibliographic and authority records, but mostly it's going to be bibliographic if you want to take a look at that. And also underneath reports here are the session statistics that I referred to before in the settings area. This is what it looks like. So it gives you session statistics and also cumulative statistics. Now, I haven't done anything to this database, but it gives you all the record types and information on what you've done for a particular point in time. I know it's so in cataloging, like to keep track of those things. Okay, so as far as cataloging goes, we've touched on this in other sessions, so I just want to go through this. We use the same indices as before, so whatever we have here in Millennium in terms of indexes to search on, these will be brought over using the same coding that we have and put it into Sierra. So this may look a little different here, but it's because it's a test server. So if we do a quick search for Inferno and we click on the search button, this is where things get quite a bit different. Now, someone pointed out to me, if we do the same search here in Millennium, these search results are quite a bit different than what you're seeing here in Sierra. Different database, obviously. But some folks really like to see the indexed entries, like they're here, and if there's more than one for a particular index entry, you can double click on it and then see what else is underneath. We have the option to change this default view back to more of what we had been seeing in Millennium, which means instead of this kind of more what you would call specific or granular information for each title, it would just have the list for each index entry listed here. And then you would use a plus sign to expand it. It does look almost identical to what we're doing here in Millennium in terms of your search results. So if you are interested in doing that, you can either contact me or Kate for your library, even for specific initials. We can change that. That's not a problem. Just so you know, at the very top of each entry in the search results, there is a line that says Index Entry Inferno. So that's why this particular title showed up in the list, or at the top of the list here, is that because it matched this indexed entry. And that's it's good to know. I'm sure those of you who've done cataloging for a while want to know why a particular title showed up in this list, and it's because of this indexed entry. It's usually a good way to solve problems too, as well as to try to figure out why those indexed entries are showing up where they are. The search results here in this view are a little bit different. You have two columns now on the far right-hand side. One is a summary column, which shows the bib record number and availability. There's at least one available item on this record. Once we get our book jackets set up, you will also see the book jacket here in preview. Now, if we're using the old Millennium style search results, you're not going to see any of that information, just so you know, you're aware of that. It's going to look a lot different. In fact, it will look, you will see the old Millennium style. If I selected one of these titles, it shows me this author title, imprint, and description here at the top. If you go back to that original Millennium view here in Sierra, you'll see the same thing. There'll be a pane here at the top with the information that you need, and also the book jacket will appear here instead of here in this preview column on the far right hand side. So it's just a little bit different way of looking at the info. This might be more beneficial for perhaps reference staff, although I'm sure reference will probably want to look at the indexed entries as well. So it's a horse apiece as to how you want to deal with this. We can modify that for the Suburban libraries on a login by login basis. I also want to point out in this view you have the option to use this eye icon, which gives you more information about the title. It kind of serves the same purpose as in Millennium as this browse display here at the top. It has a lot more information than that browse display does. So that gives you some information about the title, which would prevent you from having to go into it and actually looking at the full record. You'll see this icon throughout Innovative Sierra, not only for bibliographic records, but for patron records and crate lists. On the far left-hand side, regardless of what view that we use, either this default view or the Millennium style view, which they call compact browse, you'll see this regardless of the view that you have. There are facets here on the left that are very similar to what we're using in Encore. You'll see facets for format, language, and locations. Right now in our preview mode, we have a little bit of an issue with the location facets, and they're still working on that. They should have that done hopefully within the next week. But right now, what it's showing is numbers instead of the actual descriptions of the locations. But that should be fixed pretty shortly. Instead of the limit button that you would normally see here at the top in Millennium, this button here that I'm showing on the screen, that button is no longer available here, but it is available underneath the plus sign. If you click this plus sign, it will give you all the limits that you're used to seeing here in Millennium and put it in Sierra. It's a little different in terms of if you want to add additional limits. For example, if I wanted to add all the maps, I could do it by just clicking on the plus sign next to each one of these limiters, and then it would perform the search or do the limit that way. But for the most part, it'll work almost identically to Millennium. Okay, if we go into the full record, we'll just use number 3 here on the list. What you'll see here, and this is the same for virtually every presentation I've made so far, they've replaced all these tabs here that used to be in Millennium. If we go to, let's just take this record here. If we look at this record, you'll see the tabs here on the top of the screen correspond to what you're seeing on the left-hand side in Sierra. So everything that you've seen as tabs will show up here as buttons here on the left. If we look at the full record display, I'll just go into edit mode here. This is not something you'd be able to do in Sierra here. You can view, but you can't edit. But all the coding that we've been using, all the codes used for our fixed fields, for bibliographic and item records, everything that we're using currently has been brought over into Sierra at this point, and we're just kind of waiting to go live on April 2nd. So almost all the data is in place right now in Sierra and ready to go. But all that coding that we put work into has transferred over. The full record display is just a little bit different than what we're currently using in Millennium. If we look at the full record display here, go to edit mode, you can see this looks quite a bit different than it does here in Sierra. I think it actually is an improvement. It's just easier to work with the particularly the indicators, and also it just seems better laid out to me. That's just my personal opinion. But they were trying to go for an OCLC look. OCLC has a very similar type interface, so they were trying to go for that, kind of copy that look that OCLC uses. In Millennium, if we go back to that list here, if I wanted to go back to browse mode, I would use this browse button here in the series of buttons at the top. In in Sierra, the browse button is on the far left-hand side, and you would just click on that button to go back. So it's a little bit different. With this is something I haven't really mentioned in the other groups, but if I'm in multi-window mode, let's see, thinking here for a second. Okay, so if I have this window open, I don't think I'm in multi-window mode, but if I have several windows open and I hit browse to go back to the browse screen, it will leave those existing windows open. So if I wanted to go back and open up yet another record, I can compare all three at the same time if I wanted to. This works identically to the way it does in Millennium, for those of you who are curious. I'll go through the process of creating an item record just so you see what that looks like. So if I wanted to attach a new item to this particular record, it uses virtually the same process as you're doing right now. So you click on Attach New Item using this button at the top. And then I would, if I'm not set up with a preferred template, as in this case, I'll just choose the template from the list and then go through all of these prompts just like we're doing in Millennium currently. So you just go through each one of these. Let's see. Okay, and then if I save the information now, I've got a item record number attached, and it gives me all this information I'm used to seeing within Millennium. One thing that's a little bit different in Sierra versus Millennium is this note at the top. It will give you kind of an alert that gives you the current status of the item, not checked out and in process. If I look at any other records that are checked out within the database, it will actually say checked out to and due on a specific date. And that information will appear here and also in the status bar as it does in Millennium. So I just wanted to point that out. It's something that it basically stands out a little bit more. As far as creating cat flag T records, we'll just go through that a little bit. Let's go back to let's close this record out. This process might be a little bit different, but if we click on New and I use this data here, it's going to be very similar to what you're currently doing with your cat flag Ts. They use bib code 3, but ours our field here would say cat flag, and then you would just go through the process of creating the brief bib and then adding it to the database. So nothing's really going to change in terms of adding brief T records to the database. In fact, everything's going to be the same as far as I can tell. I couldn't see any differences there. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this, but I wanted to show you also, for those of you who do use vendor records from Baker & Taylor or BWI, the data exchange area. I don't believe it's set up for this particular login, but I wanted to take a look and see if it was available. Yeah, it's not available for me here. There's no processes that are set up. But as you can see, the screens here look almost identical. If we go back to close out this record, whatever you see here, these are all the processes that I use, not only for cataloging but for everything for my login. The process is going to look exactly the same. You can see that drop down is identical to this, and you would choose the B&T, the add order record process that you're currently using. It's this one here. Yeah, BWI BIM and order records. That same process is going to show up here as it does in Millennium. In addition to the data exchange being the same, all of your settings and codes for your Edifact ordering have been brought over. So your vendor records that include the Edifact settings and your Edifact setup in general has been brought over. So you should see everything identical to what you're currently doing. So I don't think it's going to be too much of a change as far as ordering through that interface. Some of you, I know, use Rapid Update on a regular basis, so I did want to point that out. This looks almost identical to what we're currently doing. So if we take a look at Rapid Update here in Millennium, you can see it's almost identical to what we're currently doing. So if I go back here, I can search for a review file, put in my fields that I want to change. So if I wanted to change, I don't know, LCN, not that I would ever do that. I could put in a value here and then click Start, and then it would just run through all these records and do my rapid updating. All of those options that we use for Rapid Update are also available here, so you could do update multiple records, which I have it set here, or update individual records. So if you wanted to change the status for a group of items on a cart, you could do this the same way that you're doing here in Millennium. It's the same way it will work here in Sierra. So it looks virtually the same. I don't think they've done any changes to this at all. Create list and statistics. There is another session for that, so I'm not going to really go into that too much, but I know you use that quite a bit for cataloging in general. Right now, if you look at create lists in preview mode for our system, you can show the records and show the info for a particular list, but you will not be able to do any searching or sorting, anything that would affect an existing list on the system. So we kind of have to look at it here to see how that process would work. But it's virtually identical to what you're currently doing. So if you click on, I have an open list here, click on Search Records. All of the information that we're currently using in Millennium will come on over. So all of the stored record types, you have the same options here to search against, the range, review, so forth, and then all of your fields here. Now there are a couple of additional fields that I pointed out in that other training. Most of them have to do with patron records. So if we change this to patron, there are additional fields here for at the bottom here in the address area, you can actually search on postal codes here now within Create Lists, and it's something where you don't have to export the entire address field and then massage the data then you end up with just the postal code. You can actually just get to there. I can just put in address postal code has 53233 or something like that, and just get all of the patrons that have that postal code. So that's a change. There are additional fields here for last name, middle name, that type of thing, but that doesn't work for our system. Everything is indexed underneath last name, so it really doesn't help us much. But you can use the address for city, postal code. Those two will definitely work. There are also additional fields here for holds and fines, and we talked about that in the other session. I just want to make sure you knew those were there. For acquisitions work, underneath the order record, there is additional fields here now for paid orders and received orders. So if you're interested in using those are not available here in Millennium, so these are new, brand new in Sierra. But that being said, all of these other areas here for using existing searches, meaning using searches that have already been run and are stored on the server, you can still use that just the same way as you do in Millennium. And all of our saved queries, exports, lists, searches, all of those are brought back into Sierra from Millennium. So everything you see or have been using with Create Lists will be brought in. Last thing before we kind of wrap up here, I wanted to talk a little bit about Browse Query, because I think you guys in particular will be able to use this very effectively. And change my work mode here back to catalog. This Browse Query will only show up if you're doing a search against the database. So for functions like catalog, search holds mode, and circulation, those are the two areas that I know for sure. Our serials check will also show this as well. But it's one of those context-sensitive areas. If I go into Tools now, I'll also see this option for Browse Query. And this is basically a way in which you can do a quick search against the database for, it's almost like using an index search for fields that aren't indexed. So normally if you're doing a search for title, author, subject, you have these indexes and it returns the results fairly quickly. But if you're doing searches for specific fields like notes or series titles or something that's very specific, you don't have the option to be that granular with a regular index search. So you can use this Browse Query, which brings that granularity into your search results, so you don't have to run a Create List per se. The example that I've been using is a patron record search for a telephone number. That's not a field that's indexed in our database, nor is the email address. So if I wanted to do a quick search for a patron record phone number, I would just find the fields that I wanted to search on and just put in the phone number or email that I'm looking for. This is useful for example, if we have teleforms problems, trying to locate which patron has a particular phone number. So if I run this search against the database, even though I'm in catalog mode, it will bring in the search results, and these are actually patron records. If I double click on it, it will bring up the patron record here, even though I'm in catalog mode. Then I can make my edits and then save it. If I go back to Browse, I can go back to a different record in the same result set. But as soon as I leave the screen, these search results will be gone. Or if I bring up another Browse Query search, it will remove whatever I've been searching on, and then it's gone. So it's very ephemeral or temporary. So if you want to retain the information you're using in a Browse Query, you're better off using a Create List. And I found that it's not really great for large result sets either. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. Okay, there's only one known issue that I know of with regard to cataloging that I wanted to make you aware of. In data exchange, if we're loading a lot of large files, this can sometimes cause Sierra to freeze, although the loading process continues running in the background. For the Suburban libraries and even for MTL, I don't think this is going to be a problem. We're not loading that many records at once. Usually with carts, maybe 1,000 to 3,000 records, if that, for many Suburban libraries. If that's not the case, you can let me know. But most of your carts are not going to be ridiculously large that it would cause this type of problem. But this is something that's in review with their software engineering people. Okay, so that's all I had in terms of information. What I'd like to do is answer any questions, and I see, oh, this must have been here for a while here. This is from South Milwaukee staff. Is the login always so slow? Well, in my case, I'm trying to reach a training server out in California, but I was just talking with Hugh about this, and the average time that he's looking at is like 12, 15 seconds to log in. We'll monitor this before we go live to see if this is a real big problem, but it seems to be slightly slower than Millennium was. What I'm more concerned of, not so much as the login process, but the returning of results from searches. We'd like to get more feedback from folks as we go on here, and maybe that's something that we can work with Innovative to improve. But the login process might be slow, but it's the returning of results and patron records that I'm more concerned with, frankly. Are there any other questions regarding cataloging, perhaps things I've missed? Okay, Krista has a question here regarding acquisitions and cataloging. When we get books from Baker & Taylor, we use Rapid Receive and Acquisitions module to receive titles, and I can't find that function or button anywhere. Okay, so Rapid Receive. Okay, so that's something that you're going to have added to your function list. And I think you've sent me an email already, Krista, about things that you needed added. If you could send that to Kate directly at helpdesk@mcfliss.org and ask her to add that to your function list, I'll work with her to make sure that that gets on there. That's something that we can easily modify and add. Great. Yeah, the function lists that you see here in this upper right-hand corner, those are things that we can generally going to be adding things rather than taking things away. We just want to make sure that people can do their jobs on April 2nd and not have to call us and wait for us to put the things on their list to see. Are there any other questions I can help with? I like to give people enough time to type. So hopefully we got one or two on the way. Okay, if there are a few more on the way, I'll just remind folks that we do have some Q&A sessions on March 26th and 27th. These are also go-to-meeting sessions that you can ask any question related to Sierra. So if something doesn't come up here or you forget something that you really wanted me to address, we can do it during those sessions. So if no one else has anything that we need to address, I guess we can stop the meeting. and I wish to thank you all of you for participating. I know it's going to be quite a change for some, but I think we'll be able to get through this. A lot of this looks very similar. It looks like you might be able to work with it. If there are any problems, obviously we'll take care of them as soon as we can. So thanks very much, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.